Good evening, Olga. So, thanks for joining us. On behalf of Learn by Chapter and the field, I would like to extend a warm welcome to one and all who have joined us on this platform, virtual format today. Today, we are here to discuss about inclusive education. The education beyond the bar. That's how we call it. And what's the necessity of this inclusive education? What is this inclusion all about? And is it something different from the education, or is it much integrated into the education? That is, it is one embedded into the education system. So that presentation is often clear. And why is it important? If at all we are talking about individuals, why is it important? Why is it essential to have inclusive education? Because, as we all know, diversity and inclusion serve as a fundamental job for all kinds of creativity. By placing these values at the center of our educational landscape and practices, we create a space for us and our students, our teachers, who can grow by themselves, by their own uniqueness, celebrating their unique diversity. So this kind of inclusive environment facilitates exchange of beautiful things such as ideas, openness, one's individual capacity, their dignity, their joy, and the art of reading, if it is required. So in that case, rather than viewing this point inclusion as a melting pot, the word inclusion only creates a kind of a pressure in minds of people. So instead of viewing it as a melting pot, since differences are blended away, we can create a beautiful mosaic out of it, where distinct beliefs of each people, each student, each teacher is being valued, and we exist, rather than we can say exist, coexist to make a better world. And make our learning environment a much more happier environment, and making the whole learning system much more easy and happy for everyone. Ultimately, commitment to inclusion is commitment to integrity of respecting each other as ourselves, leading to a paradigm shift from inclusion, which is no longer a forced initiative, but a simply a daily. That it represents an awakening opportunity of respecting each other's time. Basically, when inclusion is just on this phenomenon, what will happen if we have an adapting for inclusiveness? Is that a foundation can be created that meets pathways to learning. As I told you, to make our learning a much more accommodative way, such that each learner is able to learn in their own way, in their own capacity, and these adaptations can make our curriculum accessible without changing the learning outcomes. When we are making change, we cannot really mend it or blend it according to our whims and fancies, because we are following certain standards. So our curriculum can be accessible without actually changing the actual learning outcomes. But with inclusion, this will definitely provide our students an equal opportunity to learn the material as peers, and by altering how the information is presented is how it can be adapted. So that's what we are going to see. When we say accommodations, it could be for an education setting, it could be for a lesson plan, or it could be for a resource, or it could be for the assessment factor as well. So we are going to talk about making modifications in the curriculum is possible, the learning outcomes, how it can be made more convenient for the students or the teachers to use, and the strategies of modification, and with those modifications, how we can succeed ourselves. So this is what today's session is going to be all about. And on that note, please, I extend a warm welcome to one and all, and I would like to go into the session. Thank you so much. Here we are. Thank you. Today, we are going to discuss about exactly how inclusive education is going to enhance our learning. So on that note, we are gathered here to talk about the beautiful lesson that it is going to create involving our students, parents, teachers, and the students. As we all know, destiny is like a wonderful statistics in which every thread is guided by unstoppable Senda hand, which is placed by the side of another thread, and we carry a beautiful message. That's how, that's what really encourages by the necessity and the practice of the inclusive education. And with the incorporation of learn by classes, we will be able to achieve it in a much more easier way. So, today we are here to talk about inclusion is not just a right, it's a privilege. And inclusion is a right and not a privilege for a selected few. And how learn the chapter enhances of anything as what we are going to talk about. As we have spoken before, it is not a messy form. It is a beautiful mosaic that we are going to create with the diversity and the inclusions or the fundamental ground for the creativity rather than being blended away by differences that we strive and we create and we coexist with the distinct beliefs and views, with the dignity of joy, linked with the ideas of openness and for learning. So when we create a classroom structure as a democratic structure, what matters most is not only just standards, but also the values of tolerance, kindness, and sharing. So, when we have an inclusive classroom that forms a strong foundation, which is necessary for teaching students the lessons of history, geography, and the tools of modern sciences, etc., this is what the whole system of education has to become inclusive, taking into account the interests of all the students who are there with us. So, do our environments affect the quality of life? If your answer is no, definitely we differ. If your answer is yes, yes, the environmental characteristics should be arranged according to the requirements that we face in the classroom. That is what learn the chapter enables us at all points. So, administering inclusiveness from vision to actions. How to do this? With the accommodations and the modifications. Accommodations is giving them access how to accommodate. Modification with the possibility of exerting it to that to create the change that we are looking forward to. What all accommodations can be done in this pathway learning? In fact, with the adaptations that can be made the curriculum, that can be made with the curriculum accessible with the actual learning outcomes, with the mechanism of providing students with an equal opportunity to learn the same material as their peers, with the key concept of accommodations change the way the students access learning and not and what they learn. That is through a creative eye, we will try to create it with learn by chapter. So, what kind of accommodations that we can do? How the information is being presented to the students that can be modified? How the students respond? Registering the student response that can be modified. Where the learning happens, the actual setting where the learning happens, the accommodation in the setting, the learning settings that can be modified. Of course, with the time duration of the lesson, extended lesson or short lesson, in the way the lesson is being presented, that can be modified. So, all these can be done definitely with the incorporation of learnable chapter. That's what we will be able to say a concrete example that the students who understand the context is easily distracted by noise, might be cheated away from the traffic areas or window doses to help in the focus. Simple modifications that I take as an example. Modification in the curriculum, how is it possible? With the adaptation that the change the learning outcomes to align with the students' cognitive ability. That is differentiated lesson, differentiated tasks, and differentiated outcomes. I mean, learning outcomes for a while and then finally taking them to the final exercises. So with the target, particularly useful for students working below the grade level, the goal is that to allow the participation in the same general curriculum as peers rather than removing from the environment. So with learn the chapter, we will be able to do it definitely. That's what we will see how learn the chapter adopt all these things, incorporate into these kind of modifications and integrate them into the learning process and the pathway without replicating the whole situation. So gradually it takes it through. So what are the strategies of modifications or the innovation that we are talking about? Simplify the version of the lessons, providing the version of the lessons with reduced complexity as known, reducing the concept with requiring the mastery of the fewer central things. Instead of giving the whole concept as a whole, we just break them into compartments and we make the learner learn at their own pace, at their own speed, at their own capacity, but finally we will be able to take the learner forward. With the term for providing the specific tools to assist the student, that is guiding them in the pathway hand in hand, we will be able to take them further to this learning chapter. So with the accommodation and the crucial modification, we give them access for the same learning outcomes, but with a different path to the same destination. With the goal of possibility, adjusted learning outcomes based on the condition ability of the students with a shared journey, but with a differentiated path with a differentiated destination. This is how Learn with Yourself successfully modifies the whole lesson plan and gives you the expectations of the learners. So when it comes, these methods often work in tandem. That is with the accommodation, access, student given access with the modification of the possibility that a student may require the modification in a quiet setting to access their modified work, and the curriculum can be both accessible and possible. So with the paradigm of exactly by this case, inclusion assumes that living and learning together is a better way that benefits everyone, not just children who are labeled as having a difference, but when we commit to integrity, inclusion moves from a forced initiative to a simply by being there. So this is totally achieved by learning chapters. As a foundation, diversity is taken into account as a ground of creativity, taking every learner's capacity and the learning style as the foundation, and the classroom as a practice ground for democracy, where everyone can express themselves, their own interest of learning, their own way of learning. Imperatively, inclusion as a civil right, not as a privilege, that is, having with all differentiated lesson plans, with all differentiated resources in the form of videos, in the form of PowerPoints, in the form of notes, in the form of STEM-based lesson plans, and also multiple intelligence lesson plans with the Bloom's taxonomy incorporation. All these things are taken into consideration as privilege, taking that every student has a right to learn, is a right, they learn in their own way. With the practice, we use accommodations and access to ensure that every student has a right to learn and they learn in their own way. This is what is achieved by Learn with Success. So the awakening is that when inclusion is no longer inclusion, but simply being there with the awakening of the human being. This is how Learn with Success achieves it. That inclusion is not just it's a privilege. Know thy neighbor is the first key rules that we all should know in a classroom situation. We should know about it in every student, their learning capacities and their interests. And we cannot administer the lessons or the lesson plans or the tasks or the projects or the assignments as one size fits all. That is in the form of a worksheet. We need to modify it and administer it to the interest to the requirements of the learner, taking this forward as every child matters there, because their learning really reflects upon our teaching methods. So every child definitely matters there, and their assessment should be done in the form of diagnostic assessment, where their level of learning is being assessed very clearly, and we take it forward gradually from where they are and to the future, to the connected to the present, and taking it forward to the future. So we just don't guard, but we guide. We just don't manage, but we mentor. We just don't review, but we reflect. We just don't teach, but we inspire our students by using Learn with Success. So, moving ahead, how we can use this beautiful mosaic in terms of taking it forward to be very successful. As an educator, as an architect of the learning environment, the educator stands up as a central focus of the class that creates a focus who creates the total learning environment. So the chosen blended model becomes the culture that influences the whole entire system. That is the consent, the basic consent, with the skills that are to be incorporated, providing the actual learning support, learner support in the form of lesson resources and the assessment, finally mapping it with the learner characteristics. So being an educator, we are creating a culture with this mapping of content, relating it to the skills which are being embedded with that, providing the proper learner support with the assessment, monitoring the assessments, with the assessment, monitoring it at every level. That is, it is not assessment of learning, with the assessment for learning, and with using the right resources, mapping it with the learner characteristics, we are creating an inclusive culture and we are architecting our learning environment. So what kind of a blend that it will be? How can our environment better support the learning of all my students in the classroom? How we can do that? Because there are going to be minimum 20 students, 25 students. Each one of them is going to learn in their own ways, at their own pace, with their own skills. So how we are going to map it with all the learners and their learning abilities, what kind of model we can align with the learners and their teaching goals without compromising on the future goals. What change can we make tomorrow to make it a more inclusive and a blended space? This is what we are going to see further. So the golden rule basically applies here. Know thy learner. That is, we should know our students on one-to-one basis. We should know our students in the sense it is not just knowing the names. We should know their learning capacity, their skills, their interests, and the way they want to learn. So when we know that, we will be able to map it either with multiple resources or with STEM resources or with activity-based resources. Then we will be able to modify our lesson plan. So first role is that know thy learner. Know thy learner. Personalization is the ultimate goal. We have to make the learning as a personalized process for each learner. That is what education is all about. And communicate with clarity using multimodal input, oral return, repeat with student contributions, review it, go back to it, enhance it with the teaching language. Provide scaffolding, offer visuals and word banks, always take on understanding and avoiding orthogonal speech. Thereby, we will be able to foster inclusive speech, be with a mindful of facial expressions, managing the class noise levels and virtual systems, and where every learner feels respected, seen, and heard. So the basic practice for each classroom is that your reflection tools, exactly what you are going to use in a classroom situation, obstructing those strategies, what went well, what did not go well, how I can really repeat this lesson if need be, what all modifications should I do in a lesson. So all these things, reflection tools as a teacher is definitely required. With the assessment strategies of high-stakes process skills or final examinations with those types of sequence feedback, use staged assignments that allow for revision. That is, here comes our learn by chapters diagnostic assessment handy, such that every student has been given access to repeat the test as many times as they can, so they are very confident about it. So definitely our diagnostic assessments will take a lead in this factor with the boundaries means instructors are not just clinicians, not to identify diagnosis means, okay, fine, we have identified some problem in the child. Just give the medicine and leave it. It's not like that. It is our duty to take them forward. That's what our diagnostic reports, diagnostic assessment reports say that your levels of learning is high. You need to move on to this level. And when you move on to each and every level, we need to hold them hand in hand and take them forward. This is how our diagnostic assessments really help with learn by chapter. So with the engagement classroom, what is very much important is a positive management system, cultivating a positive climate, building a community through caring relationships. So with the assessment, what we have learned so far, So with the assessment so far, what we have learned is building community through relationships with parents, involving students in the creative classroom, in the creative classroom environments, partnering with parents and guardians. This is another key thing. All the reports are communicated to the parents. They are more involved in the program of study and they know each and every stage how the child is performing and how we can take them forward so that they don't meet the teachers. We are away from the situation or we are totally different from the situation where parents meet the teachers only during the open house days. So here the report sees the parent the same day as the child is performing and the child also for them to know about it, take the responsibility of the learning and they can move forward. So engaging in the daily practice of being very calm, fair and consistent, integrating a positive rituals for the day, we can make the learning more connected to life. So when coming back to the same setup with the same phenomenon, how we can print a blueprint for the training classes, how to improve student engagement and build a positive climate of learning and discipline. This is also features of or factors of education environment where the architect's first principle is engagement, not management. How do we engage the people? How do we not manage? Our being as educators, our role is not just managing the students in the classroom, but how to keep them engaged with all our activities. We all have heard about students. If they are engaged, they are very managed. This is absolutely true. And the engagement doesn't happen. It is just doing. A classroom situation, a classroom run smoothly and effectively requires a deliberate design based on rules, routine, trust, and student ownership. And this guide will definitely provide a blueprint to design such a social emotional learning approach that teaches children how to handle challenges, manage emotions, and form positive relationships. So this is also incorporated with language chapter. So with all these complexities that we have discussed, how to do, what to do, and how do we do this? We can reach there in 5 simple steps. Know your students better to identify their competencies and interests. First thing is know thy neighbor for you as an educator to know their strengths and weaknesses. Categorizing their learning styles so as to address with the supplements. You should know how they want to learn, whether they are kinesthetic learners, whether they are linguistic learners, whether they are verbal learners, whether they are numerical learners, so that you will be able to assign the class accordingly to them and to have the assessments done in the same way. So ultimately, our objective is met with the student has learned and he has learned the concept and he is moving forward. So modify the teaching learning methodology to cater to the needs, modifying the preferences to facilitate interventions, assess the learning pathway, giving the maximum benefit to the learner. Knowing the learners, identifying the basic competencies with our diagnostic assessment, you will be able to really, assess the competencies and the interests of the child. You can assign the learning, when you start using learn by factor learning resources, you will be able to categorically analyze the learning styles and address it with the supplements, whether we need to supplement it with the videos or the podcast sessions or the mapping sessions or with the notes or with the repeated practice papers, wherever you want to administer, you will be able to administer it. And with the assessment patterns, you will be able to guide the child in every step as they move forward. All these are done definitely with the multiple intelligences. So that's the art of learning and that's the game of learning. So when we come to the learning styles, how to address the diversity of the learning styles in heterogeneous classrooms, the teaching learning assessment should reflect the diversity of the intelligence and the learning styles in the classroom situations. Learn by chapter in every stage is specific with that, and we just do it with personalized single-centered learning with tailored learning approach that can be adopted, integrating multiple intelligence models into our lesson planning and delivery. One of the remarkable features of the theory of multiple intelligence is that it provides 8 different potential pathways to learning. And if a teacher is having difficulty in reaching the students in a more traditional linguistic logistic way of instruction, the theory of multiple intelligence suggests several ways in which the material might be presented to facilitate effective learning. Categorically, it does not confine and evaluate the intellectual intelligence only, but the holistic intelligence of the student that is inclusive by itself with all the 8 different methodologies that can cater to the different needs of the learner. Learn the factor successfully have this evaluation pattern and bring a change in the teaching learning environment. The main keys to reach there is that build your own assessment process. Integrate assessment and assessment track as a regular part of your classroom life. Make collaborative learning and peer assessment as an integral part of our learning process. Ensure ongoing assessment in the process. Improve knowledge and skills with consolidated, updated student data that will monitor the process. So identify the learning support to support the learning preferences. So which learn this chapter, you will be able to successfully deliver. So as a teacher in a classroom, as an instructor in the classroom, what we need to have when we talk about inclusive environments is a blended classroom with no significant learning can occur without significant relationships. First, we need to establish a relationship between teacher and the students with flexible classroom accommodations like flexible desk arrangements and positive norms to have a welcoming space for the students such that they feel emotionally safe, secure, respected, heard, and then responded. So we have to build a continuous feedback loop for all the assessments that we are providing at every stage, not as assessments for learning with our exams and the test, but assessments for learning where we take them hand in hand. So plan your assessments, align your objectives, analyze the data, provide constructive feedback. Our goal is not to grade the student, but to guide them, shifting the process from judgment to achieving for providing feedback that drives actual student growth. So we successfully do it with Learn This After. That's how the mosaic of inclusion is all out on the right to classroom realities. The foundation of inclusion is for the right, acknowledging the right, saying that education is a fundamental right for every student and building a beautiful mosaic with different beliefs and dreams coexist to create a better world through shared learning. Beyond the academic standards, true inclusion provides priorities of values like tolerance, kindness, fairness alongside curriculum founders. So with all these mosaics, we are going to adapt the learning accommodation with learning environment with accommodation to pathways that exchanges and how students learn without altering the actual curriculum and the learning outcomes. We will be able to successfully integrate this kind of a learning support and also modifying the learning possible ways for the students by adapting, by incorporating them in the lesson. All these are successfully done with Learn This After. That's what when you start using Learn This After, you will be able to identify them. So when we come to the basic needs about the learning disorders, when it comes to the inclusion process, we all know that there are different problem areas, the learning disorders which is students that the common HLDs, that is the learning disorders which are there, that is dyslexia, challenges in learning, and dysgraphia, challenges with writing, and challenges with math, dyscalculia. So if we do that, if we adopt our strategies of diagnostic assessment and our strategies of the learning and support, you will be able to identify the student weaknesses with all these things, signs to watch with inconsistency, with a consistent performance paired with the academic output, with proven support methods of multi-sensory teaching. As we know, we have hands-on materials which are there, which with the assistive technologies and individual education plans, we will be able to reach them with higher creativity, emotional intelligence, and a big picture of HLDs, basically. So when we SIDC specific learning disorders, we will be able to assess them as well. Learn This After has been addressing all these problems in a very phenomenal way. So beyond diagnosis, so how to go about it? Identify the signs and the red flags, like with the how to identify them with the output, what we get from the students, from the tests that we administer to them. With the diagnostic test, we will be able to identify them with the output, intelligence and discrepancies, and with the sequential instructional struggles that they are facing, whether they are not able to listen, whether they are able to not virtually see, whether they are not able to relate it with the verbal communication. So with the sequential instructional struggles what they are facing, we will be able to handle. But balancing with the emotional behavior indicators, we will be able to give them guidances very clearly, progressing with the disorders with executive functioning, with learning differently, but not less. They will be learning differently, but not less, with inherent of creative strengths and formalized specialized support. This is how we are successfully doing it. We are able to do with learning platform. So understanding the specific learning disorders from identification to empowerment. That's how we take it. So recognizing the indicators, inconsistent academic performance with behavior sequential risk flags, addressing with the support and strength-based instruments with tailor-made instructional strategies, with leveraging inherent strength, we allow them to learn differently, but definitely not less. So, shifting our focus from judging to guiding, to build a responsive classroom, we must understand the different purpose of assessments. Whether our focus of assessment is for learning or is it for off learning. So, the engine of the daily classroom progress is the assessment for learning. So, assessment of learning, purpose is to demonstrate the achievements, summative or the final examination at GLC. Assessment as learning as its goal is to self-regulate and critically evaluate the situation and give them the results. But assessment for learning is what we follow with the purpose of giving feedback of online teaching and for making our courses. So with the deep dive into the diagnostic assessment, that is assessment for learning, which is not for off learning, we don't follow the summative grade, but formative grade with the assessment moving with conceptual gains and identifying the weak areas, thereby making them master the knowledge. So assessment should not be for grading the learners with the intended purpose to facilitate the learning. So along with chapter, successfully do it with the new two pillars of cognitive and non-cognitive diagnostic assessment. So cognitive assessment will be quick. The goal is to identify the mastery in competencies of academic strengths and weaknesses. With the competency, the question stage MCQs, we will be able to give you remedial programs and evaluation. With the non-cognitive, go and understand the psychological status of the student with social emotional readiness and the family background, with open-ended questions to daily life feelings, interests, registering that we will be able to give the proper support and the counseling through the parental communication. So that's how Learn by Chapter address these kind of assessment strategies as well. With the holistic assessment, from the remote learning to diagnostic precision, it is a professional development to adaptive learning and storage eligibility for understanding the learning needs, with the virtual classroom engagements, with diagnostic data, analyzing the learner process, and integrating support and eligibility. Learn by Chapter with its diagnostic assessment has been successfully able to do it, being inclusive landscape, building up an inclusive landscape. So the teacher's role and the framework for implementation, successful implementation of the responsive classroom is a deliberate cycle, not just a series of random sites. It requires intentional sense and a details. That's what the students, when the teacher gives a report, it doesn't say to students, you have just gone wrong. Why the students have gone wrong? Where he has gone wrong? What we have to study before? Which are the concepts that is so weak in him? That is administered very clearly by analyzing the data and giving a very constructive feedback, not telling the students saying that you don't know this or you have to move ahead, you have to learn this. We take them hand in hand and do it. So plan and design, identify the specific skills structures, choose appropriate formats or format choices of spaces, discussions, activities, align it to the objectives where we are conducting the lesson, directly tie it with every formative assessment to the key learning topics so students understand the purpose, collect and analyze data, promptly review the students' responses to identify the trends, misconceptions, and the individual needs, use this to address the real teaching time, providing conflicting feedback, offering feedback that is timely, specific, actionable, giving students clear insights of the strengths and the areas for growth. So expanding the formative assessment solution, either we have to administer the same kind of test, definitely not. The principles of responsive teaching can be applied to a wide range of strategies. Here is a curated set of classroom ready tools categories for the primary level of teaching. It could be the discussion-based assessments. It could be student on visual kinesthetic skill assessment. It could be written reflective on pages. it could be a fishbowl activity, it could be concentrated circles, it could be a risk summary. Of all these activities which are tailor made for a student who are a self-regulated learning, they get reports and the reports are linked to their success and weaknesses. So leveraging multimedia and aids influences discussion, our oral assessment often function more effectively online due to the effectiveness of the activities with our visual postcards, with our postcards, and also the videos. So if a student has missed a lesson, he doesn't need to worry. He can go back home and listen to the postcards again and again, and so that until he is thorough with the concept and he can move further. And he can take the test then and there to understand whether he has understood the concept very clearly. So Buddhi multimedia strategies of podcast and video are the great panels to encourage dynamic discussion. Our teachers should record functions to revisit performance of accurate grading. So 4 students on this microphone clarities and 5 publishing tests. So all these are possible when you start using Learn by Chapter. With online discussion courses, we allow quality over quantity, avoid speech about number of responses to prevent effectivity. Allow sensitive responses, value the possible in 9 seconds. This is always possible in a classroom situation where the class can be made in a group question can be set up, where every student can register. By the end of this, the teacher will be able to get the class average and also about the performance of each and every student record. So this helps the teacher in a great way. Definitely with Learn by Chapter resources, we will be able to do it. So adapting assessment for remote learning and distance learning, shifting our focus from supervision to output and reflection. Peer assessment is also possible. Independent projects also possible. Jigsaw projects are also possible. Self-assessment is also possible. So whichever way that we want to use it, we can use it. Say, for example, peer assessment enhances the feedback loop without overloading the teacher. That is between the students, that is also possible. Independent project, inquiry-based assessments revolving around independent research that they are trying to exhibit, that also possible. Jigsaw projects of collaborative research work that the students want to project, that also possible. Self-assessment using rubrics and reflection to locate the learning gaps and take it further, that is also possible. So all these are possible with our adaptive assessment system in Learn by Chapter. That's how we have made the whole educational landscape and system as more inclusive. And this process creates responsive dialogue between teaching and learning for the real-time adjustments, and it is not one-time event, but it is a cycle, continuous cycle of gathering evidence and adapting instruction to meet the student needs. To generate timely student achievement information, this allows the students to monitor process, evaluate effectiveness, which leads students of exactly what they can do, what they cannot do, resulting in modifying their inspection, teaching, and also the teaching strategies and the resources which are being used. The result is that from assessment, it becomes empowerment. So we bring a responsive ecosystem of formative assessments, which is more than just a tool. It becomes a mindset and it becomes a culture. That is Learn by Chapter culture. It's a continuous process with ongoing feedback between the teacher and the student, not just one time later. It drives instruction to provide real-time data needed to make teaching responsive, targeted, and effective for learners, such that every child is very important. Every child matters here. And it empowers the students by clarifying the learning value by providing actionable feedback, making the students active participants in their own process. So the summary and key takeaways of holistic assessment is very chapter is using diverse strategies, anything for remote context, persistence with guiding sectors to uncover misconceptions, not to just to grade as mastery, because our job is not to just guard, but to guide. And not to just grade, but to guide. With a clarity, distinguish between the medical diagnosis and the educational eligibility, we try to accommodate whichever way that is possible. With the ecosystem of support, we always keep parents in the loop by partnering with the parents as coaches in the remote and professional environment, with the routines being established with our normal communication, consistent communication, checking with exactly what they have done with exactly monthly in the screen time as well, and keeping them in the loop with all of the results. The destination is empowered lifelong learners. Within we learn to recognize the diverse needs of the individual learner. Finally, we provide tools for self-navigation, empowering them to become the architects of their own learning. And the journey culminates in a student who can navigate their own learners, becoming an empowered learner In an integrated environment, that connections are possible. And this is not just a process of creating just successful students, but confident, self-regulating lifelong learners who learn the subject as in consistently moving it and doing it. That's what our goal is, not to just grade, but to shine. We just don't grow students, but we create the future of the world. So before we conclude, we're trying to start the video of I think I should stop here because so we'll go to the website, and learn the chapter website. So as you can see, my screen is visible. I'm going to go to the courses which are there. Yes, as you can see, learn by chapter. For the new people who have joined us on this platform, about learn by chapter, we are an education platform that is learning management software program, such that we provide resources to make your jobs as teachers more meaningful and much more easier. That's the stop making learning boring. That's the main message. To make it more exciting and exciting and happy for all the students who are going to use it. So everything, all you need under the name of education is definitely provided here with dynamic lesson banks, stuff often level granularity with unlimited adaptive attempts, pattern accuracy, NCRT map definitely, and the stuff definitely goes on. And everything, all that as a teacher, as an educator, what we need in the classroom is given at one platform, all under one umbrella. So now, as we go, when you start using Learn by Chapter, what all you will get, chapter-wise notes, ready to use PowerPoints, immediately aligned textbooks, classes for all classes 6 to 12. So, and also the teacher tools and the resources tools for students and the teachers, and the lessons are also included in this. So when you come to the courses, exactly, as you can see, it goes from 6 to 12, and for students and the teachers, you can use it. You can choose it for your teachers, and the students can choose themselves. Now I'm choosing it for the teachers. So as you can see, the teacher courses, there are 11 courses in it, all courses with issues. Sorry, this is science, so it has also the science space. In total, we have 128 courses. When you come to the courses, you can see the courses for English, math, science, and the main subjects, social science as well. So when we choose the class and the subject, we will go to the particular class. Say, for example, if you're going to take grade 10 science or grade 10, I thought I will take it for grade 10. All the resources, one more good news is that all these resources are made free. Say, for example, if you're going to go to class, any class that you can choose, it's not that one particular class. So when we choose, we go to that particular subject with a particular class. Now I chosen grade 9 English. So grade 9 English will open for us. As I've chosen features page is open for me. All these are made free and you will be able to use them freely now. Only thing is you have to enroll yourself with Learn by Chapter. So when we come here, you get well-structured notes, interactive PowerPoints, concept-wise video lessons, Bloom's taxonomy-based lesson plan, multiple intelligence lesson plan, chapter-wise STEM DIY activities, cross-curricular projects, NCRT textbook solutions, daily practice papers, real-life case studies, Bloom's taxonomy, multiple intelligence activities, chapter-wise learning outcomes, and category-wise quizzes. Say, for example, if I'm going to choose one chapter, the first chapter, okay? There is also orientation for teachers for each and every topic, 11 topics which have been there. Now we will to choose chapter 1, that is fun they had. As it opens, you can see the chapter 1, fun they had, and all these resources which are there, educational podcasts, chapter-wise teaching notes, interactive PowerPoint presentations, concept explanation videos, chapter plans for safety and finger success, chapter-wise Bloom's taxonomy, multiple intelligence-based lesson plan, STEM aligned DIY activities, cross-curricular DIY activities, NCRT textbook solutions, daily practice papers, then traditional education games which are being there, Bloom's taxonomy and multiple intelligences. All these are being there, and we can go one by one if you want to have a look at it. So, for example, if I open the education, this is for you to use. It's all free. It's all free now. You will be able to use it. One big thing is you have to gain access by registering yourself with Learn by Chapter. I open the podcast now. It's opening. See, the page of podcast has opened and it's in English. And the lesson will automatically take it. It's running. I'm going to play that for you to get an idea.
What if the school bell never rang? Because school wasn't really a place you went to anymore. Imagine learning, completely through personalized tech, where even the idea of a printed book feels, well.
So this podcast is definitely a boon for the students because they might be absent from the school for any reason, illness. All these podcasts they will be able to hear anytime they want, anywhere they want, such that it can become a lesson, an introduction for the lesson, or otherwise it would be as a review for the lesson that they can go back and think about what we learned in the classroom. And also our videos, our PowerPoint presentations, all these things definitely help in a great deal, and it reduces what will. It reduces the prep time, so-called preparation time for the teachers. All these resources which are already there, the teachers don't need to sit and make the lesson plans, hours and hours spending, and you don't need to hunt for resources. You don't need to hunt for question banks which are being there, and all these are made free, and you will be able to do it. Since we talked too much about diagnostic assessment, I would like to show you about diagnostic assessment as well. How assessments are very successful. As you can see, diagnostic assessment as a learning body. And definitely, this is the page that will be open. He is none other than our mentor, our guide, the person behind the whole platform, Learn by Chapter, Dr. Vichar. So, what he is assuring is that you can see, overcome your learning gaps, achieve 20% core improvement every year guaranteed. It's a 200% guarantee. It's a comprehensive coverage, learning gap analysis, real-time feedback, and certificate of achievement as well. So when you go into the classroom, you can choose your code, you can click on that, you should be able to have your ID and your password. When you click here, you will come to the assessment part of it. You will have to feed in your ID. Once you get the enrollment with Learn by Chapter, you will gain access to it. And with the gaining access, you will be able to take the test. And when you take your test, you will be able to give the report. When taking the test only, the report will come, whether the answers are right or wrong. If the answer is right, then you move on to the next question. If the answers are wrong, the report will completely tell you why the answer is wrong and what you have to learn in some section test during the time. So this is how the learning diagnostic assessment, our learning body, helps all the students. So with all these resources, you will be able to achieve much more. Thank you. So thank you so much. Thanks for taking your time and joining us. And hope this session has helped you a lot. And definitely we'd like to hear your feedback. And attendance links has been shared in the chat box. Registration link is here. Mr. Yash has shared it here in the chat box. We are giving it to you for one more time. I have shared it now. So take it from there and you can get your attendance certificate as well. And yeah. Completely free, yes ma'am. Please register. So let's stands for that all resources, all courses in Learn by Chapter completely free. You simply register, enroll yourself, and you can start taking them, start receiving.